अभी फेसबुक में भी लाइव सेशन चल रहा है, सो मैडम आप इसको स्क्रीन को या यू कैन स्टार्ट एट एनी टाइम. नाउ यू कैन स्टार्ट. या
Okay, we can start. Hello learners, welcome back to the session, interactive web counseling session of the program Postgraduate Diploma in Sustainability Sciences. We are on MSD 017 Block 4, that is the threats. And in the previous section, we studied about the other threats like threats to human health, land resources, land degradation. And one of the important threats today, what we will be discussing in our class today is occurrence of natural disasters. They are highly unpredictable. They are disrupted by human activities, and so many times, so many countries are vulnerable to different types of disasters. At some places, we find there are floods throughout the year. At certain places, we find that earthquakes are occurring. Some places have active volcanoes. So all these types of natural disasters are occurring at several places, more so pronounced by anthropogenic activities, which have accelerated the pace and frequency of these disasters. But what we are focusing today is that how do these disasters occur and what should be our action plan? Because in the wake of sustainability or sustainable development, this is a major threat, because whatever the policies we are making and whatever the plans we make and attempts towards sustainability, sustainable development, they are actually brought down by these natural disasters, because they destroy the vegetation, they pose a danger to human health, life, property. Lot of destruction every year occurs because of these natural disasters. So what should be done? So in today's session, we will see the occurrence and consequences of natural disasters. Let's see why the slide is not moving. Okay, so there are these two common terms, natural hazards and disasters. How do we differentiate them? What is the meaning of hazard and what is a disaster? So simply speaking, hazard is any change, any meteorological change, hydrological change, tectonic change, seismic change, geographical change. What do we say? That is the hazard that occurs because of the changes in the climate, because of the structure of the earth, because of the action of various physical and the chemical factors. There are several instances where the hazards takes place. But when does an hazard cause an effect to human life, human suffering, that becomes the disaster. So it is a disaster for us, because when our property is damaged, when several people are affected by that hazard, that is termed as the disasters. So that is the basic line of difference we should understand between natural hazards and disasters. Natural hazard is a change that normally occurs also in natural settings. The change is always occurring in the earth's crust, in the earth's place, in the meteorology of the region, the climate of the region, the weather patterns, the precipitation. All these are a very common feature. They have been occurring most of the times. But when they occur at such places where there is a lot of human habitation, lot of people are living, or when it occurs at the places where the forests are there or other geographical setting is such that there is a loss of the property, then that becomes the disasters. So flood is a disaster, drought is a disaster, earthquake is a disaster, because that brings harm to the economic terms also, environmental terms also, and the social terms also. So implication of the hazard in terms of loss of human life and other property damages is termed as the disasters. So we can say that natural disasters are of basically three kinds. There can be air related disasters. Air related disasters, cyclones are occurring, hurricanes are occurring. Wind speed is above 60 kilometers per hour, or it is or more than that. So that causes entirely falling of the trees, destruction of the pipelines, you can say destruction of the homes of the people if it is so. So that is the air related hazards which also occur at many places. Then there are water related deserts. Either it is due to excess of the water, which we see it happens in case of floods. Every year we see because of more than average rainfall, the floods are occurring, or it can also be occur due to less of water, the drought like conditions prevailing. So water related disasters are also very common. Movement of waves in oceans, strong movement of the waves, that is called as the tsunamis which is occurring, that is also water related disasters. Then there are earth related disasters which normally cover the earthquakes and the volcanoes. So there are different types of tectonic activities going on inside the earth, and basically these three elements of life, air, water, earth, they when get disturbed, they bring with them several types of unfortunate consequences. So with respect to that, we can say that these elements come under the natural disasters and they cause lot of human suffering, as we already know. In many cases it has been seen. But more so in today's times, we find that there are anthropogenic disasters also, because there are events which takes place and which disrupt and bring casualty to a large number of people. So what are anthropogenic disasters? Anthropogenic disasters are mostly, you can say, they occur because of certain chemicals, they occur because of certain accidents, and occur because of, as it has been mentioned here, that industrial accidents. We very well know what happened during Bhopal gas tragedy. So that was a disaster. Still people are suffering. There is a genetic mutation. There is a lot of other deformities in the children, and also in the soil and the composition at those places because of the methyl isocyanate gas that was leaked from the factory. So that comes under the industrial accidents. In many places today, in Delhi also, in several other places, we have seen lot of cases happening because of some chemical spill taking place, because of release of certain harmful gases taking place. They come under the category of the industrial accidents. There are instances of wars happening across the countries, across the regions, riots taking place, act of terrorism. We all put them under the category of anthropogenic disasters. And toxic spills, when it occurs in the seas because of the spills taking from the ships, it may occur in any, you can say, in any factory, any industry, nuclear power plants, they may also be releasing at several moments. So these are the toxic spills which occur, and they also bring damage. Now, one thing we must point out here, that whether it is the natural disasters or the anthropogenic disasters, in most of the cases, it has been seen that it is the poor people who are largely affected. If you take the case of the floods, if you take the case of any industrial accident taking place, it is the poor people who are devoid of proper shelter because of easy availability of, you can say, the land at those places. In many places, it has been seen that they are the ones who are living close to these places. And because of the fact that they are living close, they suffer the most. Because if you take the case of the industry, the people have been living there, they have been, working in those factories, and because of, in case of any such accident happening, it happens that they are the most vulnerable. So that is why whole our trajectory of sustainable development, where we think that every individual is important, where we think that there should be equality, equity. So not only in the economic terms we are speaking, or the social upgradation we are talking, but if you look at this aspect, that the occurrence of the natural disasters in any country, it is a region, we find that it is the poor people who are the most, you can say, vulnerable to these disasters taking place. So therefore, disaster preparedness and disaster management is also one of the most important step ours towards moving for the sustainable development and accidents, as it has been said. Now, why we are so much concerned, that we find that because of the huge landscape, because of the huge area of our country is more prone to natural disasters. In the hilly areas, we find that there are a lot of, every time the landslides have occurred, every time we can say that the mountainous regions, lot of cold waves are there. So many things have been happening at those places. So northern mountain region is also vulnerable to these kind of disasters taking place. We have the mountainous regions where there are every year instances of the landslides taking place. Also earthquakes are taking place at those places. We find that during winters, the movement of the cold waves taking place. So the entire Himalayan region of our country is under the pressure of lot of types of disasters, which may be occurring at those places. Then on the other hand, we have the Indo-Gangetic plan. In the Indo-Gangetic plan, there are fair chances of having floods. We find that there's a more than usual rainfall taking place in those areas. There is medium to heavy rainfall, and because of which what is happening is that the area gets drained and flooded during the monsoon season. So unvariable patterns of rainfall. Not only the duration has reduced nowadays. Initially it was the case that it used to rain for 3 months, but now it is only raining for 10 days, 15 days, and in those 10-15 days a huge spillover taking place. So it creates a conditions which are like the flood like conditions are prevailing. Then we have the Deccan Plateau, which is most of the times vulnerable to the droughts, minimum rainfall. So you can see how variations we are finding in our country. At some places we have floods occurring every year, but in certain places there are always minimum rainfalls, and the region is suffering from the drought-like conditions. Similarly, Western Desert, we find that because of the scarcity of the rainfall in these regions, there are quite occurrence of the droughts, heat waves. That is also very common in these areas, which has now recently been recognized as the hazard, you can say, the heat waves. And we have the long coastline of around 8,000 kilometers coastline is there in our country, and the entire coastline of our country exposes us to different types of the disasters, which are very common to the coastal areas. There are, there may be occurrence of the cyclones taking place, hurricanes taking place, or you can say typhoons occur, tsunamis may occur. So all these are the hazards which are the coastal areas. So if you look at the map of India, you find that every region is vulnerable to a specific type of the hazard, and therefore it is of utmost importance that our disaster management plan is so robust, is so exhaustive, that we are able to fight against the earthquakes at one hand, and the drought at another hand, and the floods at the other hand. So we have to have a very meticulous disaster management plan, so that we are not at the losing end, and we are prepared to fight against these disasters. So let us one by one see what are the most common disasters occurring, what are the causes, and how do they occur. So as we already know, earthquakes occur because of the tectonic movements taking place inside the earthquakes. Earthquakes are unpredictable, unforeseen. We have seen the dreadiest earthquake in our country. We are known with the Bhuj earthquake, which took place in 2001. There was a massive earthquake. So because of the several examples of earthquakes, still we say that they are highly unpredictable, they are highly unforeseen, and they occur because of the shift in the plates inside the Earth's crust, and it leads to destruction of life and property because of the type of the congested areas people are living, because of the type of the material we are constructing our buildings, because of the urbanization that we are seeing. There are huge chances that we are sitting on the bed of the earthquake. We find that there is a great vulnerability of earthquakes taking place in any area, and if the buildings are not constructed accordingly, if there is lot of habitation of the people living in those areas, the congested areas, naturally the destruction is more. So whenever any type of such disasters takes place, any earthquake taking place, or any volcano taking place, all our efforts which we have done so far come again back to the square one, and we have to again restore the living conditions of that area. And so therefore it is very much essential to have a kind of an approach where we are able to foresee the disasters, and we do our construction and we plan our activities in such a way that in case any disaster occurs, in case any such thing happens in future, we are able to do minimum losses, so that there is a minimum destruction of life and the forces. So how that is, it has been written over here that how do we manage? Management occurs that earthquake prone regions must be recognized, must be earmarked, and accordingly all the, you can say, industrial activity and all the construction activity must go in that manner, and appropriate relief must be given to the people. And similarly, we are very well know about the landslides. Landslide is the huge rock or a very big stone moving from its place, rolling downwards, and which can obstruct the flow of the water also if it is a water body nearby, or it may cause huge destruction to the people, cattle, houses of the people. So many factors are essential, are associated with it. So there are natural and artificial causes. Naturally, it occurs when there is a huge rainfall taking place. Whenever earthquakes are also, many a times if earthquakes occurs, then it is followed by the landslides in the hilly areas. And why do we say that artificial causes? We were talking about deforestation in our previous class. So whenever there is loosening of the soil, loosening of the landscape because of the absence of the trees, there are more chances that the region becomes exposed to landslides. Further construction activities, we have seen how badly the road management is done, how badly the construction activity goes on in the hilly areas, and therefore if the area is already vulnerable to the landslides, it becomes one of the important cause of the landslides to occur. As in the other cases, there it is destruction and the rural urban habitation occurring. People who are living outside, you can say, on the outskirts of any city areas and this thing. So in case of landslides, and these are very common in the villages of in the upper areas, if you go and see in Chalk, you will find that there are a lot of cases where landslides have occurred and the poor cattle have gone. Or you can say in many cases there is a destruction of the habitation taking place, our fields are destroyed. So these are some of the common and mostly unnoticeable, unrecognized natural disasters taking place. And through remote sensing, it has been seen that how whenever mining activity, for example, if it is done, and for mining activity, we are just sort of explosions and everything occurring at the vulnerable places. So if it is not done in a proper manner, the area becomes more susceptible, and more chances of occurrence of such type of things is very common in these areas. Then you know about the floods. Floods in a common perception is excess of water. When the water is not on the rivers or on the water body, and the water is in our homes or it is on the roads, we say that it is the floods. So there are different kinds of floods. There are flash floods, river floods, and coastal floods. We need to understand this. What is a flash flood? Flash flood occurs, for example, when there is a cloud burst, sudden rainfall taking place. For example, there is a tsunami. So because of tsunami, there is an earthquake inside the water body, and therefore there is some disruption and the water is just coming out from those areas. That is the flash floods. Whenever there is a heavy rains taking place for 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, what we see during the Uttarakhand disaster, we have seen that how the flash floods occurs, and how because of small incidents taking place and the huge volume of water comes out, that is the flash floods, because in such instances during a day or 2 or 3, the whole area gets submerged with water. Then there are river floods. River floods pertain to the fact when there is a heavy rainfall occurring for a large number of days, precipitation continuous. Then it is the river floods, which normally occurs in the monsoon season, where we find that rivers are overflowing, and rivers may overflow also in cases where we have done construction activities in the catchment areas, when the floodplain areas, we have the houses constructed over there. So whenever it rains and the river loses its course, it appears to be a river flood in those areas. Then there are coastal floods which occur when there is instances of heavy rainfalls taking place along the coast. In cases of even cyclones also, we find that after the cyclone has gone, there are the floods which are accompanied. So we very well know what are the causes, in spite of the fact that it appears that it is because of the excess of rainfall, but deforestation is one of the most important cause, because it is the loosening of the soil which makes water easily come out. It is not soaked out. Urbanization is very common. Because of that, construction activities, drainage system, all these things are very much related with each other. Then there are changes in the river course taking place, how the river moves, construction of the dams which are not so eco-friendly, you can say. Then there are man-made impediments. For example, any sort of construction activity being done on the course of the flow of the river, that will lead to flood-like situation in the nearby areas. Then how do we manage the floods? It is through plantation we can do. Then proper drainage management we can say. Then proper, you can say that how designing the river course properly. Then it is floodplain zoning, because already if the area is floodplain, then we have to make our construction activities. We have to plan our cities, wetlands in such a way that we are able to catch the water which is coming, and we are able to utilize it for the benefit of irrigation purposes, for other meeting the needs of the other people. So that kind of earmarcation is very important, and forecasting, because weather forecast department, in many cases we find the coastal areas, people, if they get a due warning beforehand, they may be shifted. So the damage done because of floods may be reduced. And then another important natural disasters common in the coastal areas is the cyclones, where a low pressure is built up in the center, and because of which the strong winds flow along the tropical seas, and because the speed of the wind is so high that it damages the buildings, the telecommunications, all sort of bridges may break in certain areas. We have seen that how cyclones have occurred in India also. We have seen not many, you can say, examples where cyclones have occurred, and cyclones have disrupted the whole economic systems of those places. And in this also, forecasting and warning is very essential, because through our means and measures, we can forecast the occurrence of these disasters. Early warning signals, if they are giving, they help a lot to people who can plan their activities, who can shift themselves if such kind of prediction is made beforehand. And heat waves has been recently added into the list of the natural disasters, because we know we call it as the Loo in summers, when we find that winds blow, and it has been past 1 or 2 years, there have been examples where heat waves have been a prominent occurrence in, say, where there is a abnormally high temperatures going above 47, 48 degrees during summer season, and it is accompanied by hot air flowing, and that also it also leads to forest fires also. So that is also one of the important you can say natural disasters. So how do we plan, and what is a disaster management? Management is actually foreseeing the things which may occur in future, and how we are able to minimize the destruction which may be occurring because of those disasters. So it is organization and management of resources and responsibilities. It is a responsibility of the authorities. It is a responsibility of the people. It is a responsibility of the governments, and also the people who are aware of it. So it is it has different stages. Preparedness of disaster is different thing, and at the time when disaster has already occurred, we need to show a graded response. And recovery is also very important in many cases, as it has been said earlier also, that it is the poor who are the most vulnerable and most affected in case of any natural disaster taking place. So what happens is that these people, because of their economic condition, and in such cases, in the cases of disasters, they also lose their livelihood. So the recovery of those people, the recovery of those places takes a very long time. So it doesn't occur at the places which are already resourceful, but the places which are more vulnerable, and people who are poor, they take a long time. So recovery also has to be kept in mind while preparing our disaster management plan. So what are the objectives, what are the goals of disaster management? And one of the obvious goal of this thing is to reduce and avoid the potential losses from the hazards what are occurring. So how can we reduce the losses, how can we minimize? Because beginning also we were saying, we were discussing this thing, that they are most of the times unpredictable. So how the losses are going to occur, but we have to see how can we minimize the losses which are occurring, and how can we assure prompt and appropriate assistance to the victims? What kind of assistance measures can be given so that the people, the victims, can get relief through the efforts and recovery? As it has been again stressed here, that we have to build back better. This is the slogan which we always say. So we have to build again, but better, because we have seen that in case of disasters, in case of floods, if you talk about the Bhuj earthquake, if you talk about the Uttarakhand disaster which took place, so we have to see that our recovery plans are very effective. So there are different phases. These are the 5 phases of disaster management. One is prevention. We have to see that how our interference into the natural environment and the settings, how does it aid and how does it exaggerate the occurring of the disasters. So when we are going for construction activities in the floodplain areas, if we are constructing high-rise buildings in the places which is already earthquake prone, so that actions should be taken. So proper environmental impact assessment information system must be put in place before seeing, so that we are able to prevent the occurrence of the disasters in its first place. We are able to minimize the losses which are occurring. We can see that how we can reduce the occurrence of the disease, and that is one of the most important place, because every region has 2 aspects. One is the vulnerability and another one is the resilience. So vulnerability is, you have to check while prevention that how a particular region is more vulnerable towards the any disaster taking place. So you see the coastal area of the country, or you can see the Indo-Gangetic plain. You can, with the help of the different techniques available, with the help of the past events, with the help of the meteorological conditions, we can explore how vulnerable the area is. What are the chances of occurring of these disasters in these places during last 10 years and another 15 years? What is the chance of the occurrence? So that is the vulnerability. And resilience is, if at all any such disaster takes place, what is the resilience of that area to fight back, to recover. So exploring the vulnerability and the resilience plan will help in preparing a plan in such a way that there is prevention of the natural disasters taking place. Then there is mitigation, how we are able to mitigate the effects, how we can go for the engineering aspect, the technical aspect, the biological aspect, the social aspect, all these aspects and all these inputs from these different, you can say, areas, is very essential to see that we are able to minimize the losses which are occurring during these disasters. So our mitigation plan must has to be very effective to see that how we can minimize the losses which are occurring. So here an exhaustive disaster management plan must be put in place. Then there is preparedness. How do we prepare ourselves? What is the difference between mitigation and preparedness? Mitigation is to designing and preparing in such a way that there is a minimum loss. But preparedness is that we know that this place is prone to this disaster, so we must have all the emergency plans put in place beforehand. So preparedness is an ongoing process, it always goes on. We must ourselves equip with the latest technologies, with the latest methodologies and the latest forecasting measures, so that we are always prepared to fight with these disasters, so that we know that how we can put all our measures in place when we talk about the preparedness. And that is actually one of the most important things which is mostly lacking in many areas. So whenever any type of flood occurs or cyclone occurs, in most of the cases we are not prepared. We don't have not just the medical in terms of medical facilities availability, but also in terms of our relief measures, in terms of our other emergency measures. So all that type of preparedness in terms of collecting all the relevant information, that is missing. So preparedness is one of the most important, you can say, step towards minimizing, towards the prevention and mitigation. What we have studied above 2 points, they can be addressed more precisely if we are prepared for the disaster. So disaster preparedness must always be at the forefront for any disaster management plan. Then there is response. Response means how do we react in case of any disaster taking place. What kind of emergency services are available? Fire, ambulance, police, all these are the critical aspects. Food availability to the victims. In case of accidents, are we able to provide them medical help? So how do we react in case of any response, in case of any disaster if it has taken place? So response also plays a critical role. We have to see there are short-term responses and there are long-term responses. So providing medical aid to the victims, giving them food will come under the primary response, so the immediate response to the people. Secondary response comes from the phase that whether we are able to give them shelter, whether we are able to give them the livelihood which they were having before. So that is considered as the long-term response. How are we able to address the concerns which have come out by the disasters? And then there is the recovery. After earthquakes, after floods, we have to see that how we are able to plan our recovery measures and how we are able to see that what changes do we propose, what kind of measures do we propose in the same piece of land, so that there is a uh, as it was said, that we have a sustainable societies, we have a sustainable structures, we have a build back better mechanisms more in place, so that we are able to get back to the original state. So that comes under the recovery plan. So these are some of the important phases of the disaster management plan. And we can see that how we are able to manage in case of any disasters occurs. All these, we have National Institute of Disaster Management in our country, NIDM, which at all levels works for the prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery of the disasters at various levels. So when we have looked at all the disasters, the common ones we have highlighted, and we have seen that how do they occur, what are the causes for them, how we can manage them, and what are the major effects we have seen, and some part of the disaster management plan also we have discussed. So with this, I end. And if there is any question, anything, we can address.